This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hundreds of foreign nationals leave South Africa following attacks. Sudan's Prime Minister vows to boost ties with South Sudan. And the family of former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe agrees to a burial in the National Monument. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program. In your business news, Nigeria plans an increase of value-added tax on goods and services. And in your sports, former Cote d'Ivoire and Chelsea forward Didier Drogba is seeking the presidency of the Ivorian Football Federation. More than 200 Mozambican and Zimbabwean citizens are on their way back to their respective countries after violent xenophobic attacks in South Africa. 3 buses left a community center from Katehong Township, where foreign nationals sought shelter since last week when foreign-owned businesses were looted and burned. Hundreds of nationals from Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Nigeria have been repatriated since the violence began earlier this month. South Africa promised last Thursday to tackle the prejudice fueling the wave of deadly riots and xenophobic attacks amidst international anger over the attacks.
I'm going to Maputo. Because that country is not okay, man. It's rough. I got to Maputo just to start again my life.
They've been staying here since last week Thursday, and we as the Red Cross, we've been providing meals and what we call restoring family links with these people so that they could call, giving them telephone to call home to let home that they are okay, they are fine. So they've been staying here since from last week Thursday till today. So it's fully 8 days today.
Well, Angelo Coppola has been monitoring the situation in Katlehong, east of Johannesburg. He brings us this report.
Another group of foreigners, this time from neighboring Mozambique, also took shelter. They've been in the hall for a week now.
Yes, we can confirm that we've got 125 Mozambican nationals that left here at this hall, at the H. Williams Hall, with 3 buses and a truck. So they've basically including the children, some of the adults they've got their children with. So in total is that number, and they've gone escorted through to Mozambique border post.
Many Mozambicans who fled the violence lost everything, including the tools of their trade. In Dito's case, he was a welder. It was all destroyed in the arson attack on his home in the Holomisa informal settlement, and he can't go home.
Even government is saying don't go that side because it's not finished inside my place. You see? So that's why I'm staying inside. I don't know where to go, where going to open, I don't know. Because I'm not going to space, I'm not going to job, I'm not going to nothing. I'm here.
Kalitso lost everything except for the clothes on his back. He wants to find a new place and start earning money again. He can't go home empty-handed. He's also lost all of his documents.
So I have money, or I have to go see another place. I'm going to say, because another people, another place doesn't have question, you know what I'm saying? I don't say another people must go out, never say like that. You can stay there, the parent there, I'm going to stay there. Now we should only 2 months to go home. So I can have something to go home, I give my children, I give my mother, you know what I'm saying? Because, that side, no money. Just when I'm coming here, I'm looking some money.
It's not a question of whether these Mozambicans can or want to go home. It's a question of they can't afford to get home, and they can't go back to where they were staying either here in the Katlehong area because it's still too dangerous. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Katlehong in South Africa.
And staying in South Africa, and hundreds of protesters have gathered in Sandton City outside the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, raising awareness about gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. The protesters began gathering in the wee hours of the morning. With cases of women and child abuse in the country on the rise, many are now calling for the government to declare a state of emergency. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
South African women are taking a stand. From 3 a.m., hundreds of women and some men started pouring into the Sandton CBD to stage a massive protest outside the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. The gathering is under the banner of #Sandton Shutdown to highlight the scourge of gender-based violence. The protest comes just a day after national crime stats indicated that violent crimes and murder had significantly worsened.
We're asking the JSE to impose a 2% levy on all JSE listed entities to actually help towards the GBV fund that needs to actually champion the cause of gender-based violence.
The choice of the protest venue is deliberate, as Sandton is Africa's richest square mile. And these protesters say corporate South Africa are not innocent bystanders in the war on women, and that they must be held to account. At the break of dawn, traffic had come to a standstill here in Sandton, an intended consequence, of course, as these protesters, mostly women, want everybody in South Africa to stand up and deal with the issue of women abuse.
Enough is enough, and we have to get them where it hurts, and they don't want to listen, so hopefully they'll feel it by shutting down a business centre.
Sandton is where all the money is, where everyone's working, and we need to make a big impact. We need to make a change, and this is the only way we're going to do it.
I'm here to represent the women with disabilities, to let the society that even though we are disabled, we are not the invite for them to kill us. We are not the invite for them to rape us.
We're here to fight against the injustice towards women who have been raped in our country. It's become a national crisis at this point, and we need to fight against it with all we've got.
It's our civil duty to act as a people against gender-based and race-based crimes. And coming together as a community is important to make the change that we need.
I feel that it's important just to unify, and like the more people we are, the louder our voices will be heard.
The protesters will continue to occupy the Sandton streets for the rest of the day this Friday. Yudi Sanjamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Sudan's new Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is in South Sudan on a 2-day visit. Hamdok's visit aims to cement a new plan for peace talks with many of the rebel groups fighting against the government. The deal was brokered by Juba on Wednesday. This is Hamdok's first official visit since becoming premier. CGTN's Jen Keo reports.
Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok and the South Sudanese government held a 2-hour meeting to discuss pending issues in the 2005 peace deal. The deal ended 2 decades of war with Khartoum and paved the way to South Sudan's independence in 2011. South Sudan plunged into its own war 2 years later, leaving almost 400,000 dead, millions displaced. Tensions have since remained high between Khartoum and Juba over border disputes and the oil trade.
We have discussed many bilateral issues concerning outstanding issues in the peace agreement. Not the recent one, but the comprehensive peace agreement, where the issues of borders, issues of corporations, issues of economic and political issues are still to be discussed. And it is a great opportunity right now that there's a spirit to move on from these issues.
Analysts say the two nations have been pushed together by the grinding war in South Sudan. The war has defied several peace attempts and an economic crisis in Sudan, leading to a drastic collapse of the South's oil industry. The worsening economic crisis also sparked nationwide protests that triggered the fall of former President Omar Hassan al-Bashir. One of Bashir's last moves before his ouster was to broker a peace deal between President Salva Kiir and his rival rebel leader Riek Machar. The ruling Sudanese Sovereign Council aims to bring a swift end to insurgent conflicts that have plagued Sudan for years.
I'm very delighted to be here in my second home, Juba. As I promised early after I have been sworn in, that my first visit outside Sudan will be to Juba, and we are here today. But looking for a very strategic, very distinguished relationship between our two nations, and the sky is the limit for this relationship. We hope to have a prosperous relationship that will address issues of trade, border issues, oil, movement, free movement of our people between the two countries, and all this agenda.
Observers are keen to see if Khartoum's new government will push Kir and Machar to advance on the implementation of the deal. The two men met this week in Juba for the first time in 5 months. They've agreed to form a transitional government by mid-November. Jane Kale, CGTN.
Well, let's expand this conversation a little bit more and get more from Bassam Ali, a researcher on political science at the Cairo University and also an editor at the Ahram Online in Cairo. He's joining me from Egypt. And Reverend John Gashimo of the African Inland Church, he's joining me here in Nairobi. Bassam, first off to you though, because Sudan says it is committed to supporting President Salva Kiir's efforts to bring peace to South Sudan. Now, after years of tensions between the two countries, there seems to be a renewed commitment to supporting each other. What do you make of this?
I think it's time for both of them to discuss the post-separatism issues that has been stalled for long years. I think we're all over the world, we're seeing how much these type of issues of separatism makes relations between countries and areas very hard to deal with, like the post-Brexit in Britain, or even at least the discussion about separatism in areas like Scotland or Catalonia in Spain. So imagine how hard the situation would be when separatism becomes a reality, as it is the case between Sudan and South Sudan. So I think this is a very good opportunity for both of them to start discussing these issues, which I think include making borderlines, making good arrangements on oil and trade, and also discuss how the movement of people would take place. This is a very important step in the history of both countries, and on its basis, the future of their social, political, and economic relations will take place. I mean, its shape will take place in the coming years.
Right. Reverend Gashimo, this is an important step for both countries, Sudan and South Sudan. And the rival leaders have pledged now to meet the deadline of implementation of that peace deal. But you're asking that this be implemented before the deadline. Why is that?
Religious leaders are taking political leaders accountable for what they have agreed. Because if they implement what they have agreed, it will bring peace to Southern Sudan. And when there is peace in Southern Sudan, even the Northern Sudan also will have an ally in a neighborhood. So what the religious leaders are saying is that the political leaders made an agreement, and it is important to implement that agreement because it is aimed at solving the conflict that have been pertaining in Southern Sudan for the well-being of the people of Southern Sudan, and by extension, the neighboring countries.
Right. Bassam, both countries have had their share of crises here, but how important is the stability of both countries?
The time, I think it's all about the timing. We have to put in consideration the local conditions of each of both nations. On the one hand, Sudan has passed through a tough period of turmoil in the past month due to the uprising against Omar al-Bashir, which led to his ouster at the end. On the other hand, you have some sort of an ongoing conflict. Despite the number of deals and negotiations that were in place, you still have some kind of a conflict between President Salva Kiir in South Sudan and the rebel leaders, Riek Machar. The thing is, when you have these kind of conditions, people need to hear some good news. and the significance of these good news, which is embodied in the fact that they are preparing themselves for more talks and negotiations about the stalled issues, is that it might have some positive implications on the domestic situation. For the Sudanese leadership, it would be good for the people to know that there are no more tensions with South Sudan, and that they are now ready to have better relations, better connections, more fruitful talks, more peace-related discussions in the coming period. On the other hand, for South Sudan, I think the situation is not much different, and President Salva Kiir is in need for having a what we can describe as something positive coming from Khartoum. So the thing is, the time of the discussions and negotiations between parties says it all, and we have to put in mind, okay.
Right. Let me just drop in.
And we have to put in consideration that these okay.
Let me drop in Reverend Geshumu here before we get your final comment, Bassam. Reverend, so the religious leaders are asking the political leaders to play their part to bring about peace in South Sudan, but you are also calling on East African leaders to do more to support a long-lasting peace in the country. What exactly can East African leaders do to promote peace in South Sudan?
To begin with, according to Bassam, it's unfortunate that you have two neighboring houses that are on fire. But that aside, what we are saying is that the peace in Sudan is not just for Southern Sudan per se. It also goes beyond the neighbors of Sudan, I mean the neighboriness of Sudan to the countries that are neighboring Sudan. Nobody enjoys to see people from another country suffering in their country. It would be better if we are saying, let's visit each other in our countries, enjoying peace.
So what can East African leaders do, though, to promote peace in South Sudan?
They are supposed to play a major role, because I believe leaders, presidents, have a way that they communicate as heads of states. What are they telling one another when they are communicating privately and even in public? Nobody would wish that one country has problems against the other. So they are supposed to make sure that in their interactions with, because the president of Southern Sudan is a colleague to the presidents of the neighboring countries, they are supposed to kind of plead with him for the sake of peace in Southern Sudan and even in their countries.
Right.
No country is willing to take refugees. You know, it requires a lot of resources to do that. And once there is peace in Sudan, East Africa, Africa, I mean, will prosper.
So there's going to be prosperity with peace in South Sudan. Bassam, just very briefly, as we get your closing comments here, Khartoum seems to be wielding a lot of influence in the affairs of South Sudan. After all, this peace deal was brokered by former leader Omar al-Bashir. What more can Khartoum do, though, to ensure the Juba peace deal is implemented? Very briefly, Bassam, from you.
I think, firstly, there has to be a number of assurances on the political and diplomatic level, which I'm sure already took place. Assurances that conflict is no longer an option. And that actually happened yesterday in the meeting between Hamdouk and Salva Kiir. On the other hand, there has to be some kind of a solid plan on how can both sides move forward with their peace arrangements. Are they going to discuss economy? Are they going to discuss business arrangements? Are they prepared to make an easy or a good facilitation of movement of people along the borders? Are they willing to sign long-term agreements on joint investments, on foreign cooperation? There has to be some good plan on how the political talks or the official statements that are coming out from both sides can be translated into something solid that the people on the ground can benefit from. And that includes the political level, the economic level, everything. the peace deal has to be reflected on the lives of the people in Sudan and South Sudan so that it can be a long-lasting one.
Bassam Ali joining us there from Cairo, and Reverend John Gishimu in Nairobi. To you both, thank you for your insights. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. The United Nations votes to ease an arms embargo on Central African Republic. And Tunisians are skeptical of change in the upcoming presidential election. Stay with us.
Data out of the country, the countries have foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe will be buried at the National Monument on Sunday. That's according to his family, retreating from an earlier decision that the former leader will receive a private burial sometime next week. Both the government and the family had been locked in a tussle over where the late Mugabe will be buried. Meanwhile, the first of two mass body viewing ceremonies took place in Harare Thursday.
A familiar scene. Thousands gathered at the airport to welcome back Robert Mugabe. Only this time, it's not as president of Zimbabwe and not the man in the flesh. Grief-stricken supporters gathered to receive Robert Mugabe one last time, and on Thursday, thousands more came to say goodbye. They are in mourning, but you wouldn't think it from the singing and dancing. That's because people here say Mugabe's contribution should be celebrated. This stadium is where Robert Mugabe took the oath of office in 1980, becoming Zimbabwe's first leader in 1980. It is quite fitting that it is here where thousands of his supporters have been afforded an opportunity to bid him a final farewell.
When I saw him in the coffin, it felt like it was my father who had passed away, because he was my father in politics. He was a great advisor, and we will never forget him.
My mother gave birth to my brother when she had traveled to one of Robert Mugabe's rallies. So I supported him and the ruling party because it's like family to me.
In every century, we only get one person like Robert Mugabe. There can't be any other like him. He's the only one.
It's not just Zimbabwe that has lost a loved one. Africa and the rest of the world is mourning. He may not be perfect like everyone else, he had his faults, but today we are remembering the good things he did.
On Friday, Zimbabweans will get another opportunity to pay their last respects before a state funeral on Saturday. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The United Nations Security Council has unanimously adopted a resolution to ease the arms embargo imposed on the Central African Republic. The move follows calls by the CAR government to reduce the exemption procedure for certain arms and ammunition. The government in Bangui plans to shore up its security force and fight armed groups that control parts of the country. The UN arms embargo was imposed in 2013 when the country descended into chaos after President Francois Bozize was ousted.
By significantly easing the exemption procedure for weapons, the Council is providing a strong response to the appeal of the Central African authorities, which was reiterated just a few days ago. The resolution that we have just adopted will indeed make it possible to facilitate the re-equipping of the defense and security force of the Central African Republic so that they can contribute to the security of their country and the security of all the citizens of the Central African Republic.
Armed groups are still present across a large part of the Central African Republic and continue to be supplied thanks to illicit flows of weapon and ammunition to a large extent from neighboring countries. It's absolutely crucial that all member states, particularly those in the sub-region, pool their efforts to fully respect the sanctions regime so that it may be effectively implemented in support of peace in the Central African Republic.
Tunisia heads to the polls this weekend. 26 candidates will run in Sunday's presidential election. Among them are a jailed media tycoon and 2 prime ministers. The first round election is seen as key to securing the North African nation's young democracy as it struggles with economic troubles and Islamic extremism.
26 candidates are vying to be Tunisia's next president. With so many candidates, there's no clear front-runner. Although Prime Minister Youssef Chahed, jailed media mogul Nabil Karoui, and Abdel Fattah Mourou of the moderate Islamist party Ennahda are getting attention. Salma Loumi, a former tourism minister, is also seeking to rewrite history by being elected as the first female president.
We have to encourage investment, as we say in our agenda and our program. We want to focus on growth and use all the tools available to the presidency to push growth and investment forward.
Other candidates turn their focus to national security during the country's first ever presidential debate.
Today there is a phenomenon of globalized terrorism. The Tunisian state is unable to fight terrorism alone.
Away from the debate stage, Tunisians have mixed reactions to the group of candidates.
Things aren't clear in the elections. Until this moment, I'm not sure who I'm going to cast my vote for. Things aren't clear. I still don't see a candidate that is qualified and worthy of running Tunisia.
We hope that things will improve. The Tunisian people are informed and they're cultured. I have faith in them, that they will be able to tell the difference between right and wrong. I hope we will end up with an excellent result.
The presidential poll will take place on September 15th, leaving residents some more time to make up their minds. Astatal, CGTN.
As the conflict in Libya continues, 98 vulnerable refugees have been evacuated to Italy. Fighting between the UN-backed government and Eastern Military Commander Khalifa Haftar has raised fears for the security of migrants stuck in detention centers. The United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, coordinated the evacuations with the help of Libya's Ministry of Interior. The refugees had been detained in a gathering and departure facility. The UNHCR has helped 1,474 refugees leave Libya this year. They have been resettled to other European countries and Canada.
UNHCR is evacuating 98 vulnerable refugees from Libya to Italy. Evacuations are a lifeline. It provides a future full of hope for many refugees who were detained for over 8 months in Libya. We continue to call on the international community to provide more slots for evacuation and for resettlement for vulnerable refugees out of Libya. And we hope that we can continue with this life-saving program to help many more refugees who are currently stranded in Libya.
Ethiopia is considering banning beggars and sex workers that operate on the streets of its capital, Addis Ababa. The city has put forward a draft legislation on the ban in a bid to improve its image. But it also has plans on how to take care of those living on the street. CGTN's Daniela Pearson reports.
18-year-old Birtukan Elemayehu is 7 months pregnant. For the past 4 years, she's been living on the streets of downtown Addis Ababa.
Whether it is street children or sex workers, it is not a life we choose. No one chooses to become a prostitute or a beggar. While there's work or roof over their heads, what we want is some sort of training. But overall, we want a roof over our heads.
The Addis Ababa Bureau of Social and Labor Affairs estimates that roughly 50,000 people live on the streets of Ethiopia's capital, with nearly 10,000 sex workers. The government is providing rehabilitation centers.
I was happy to come to this center because it was my wish, even while I was on the street, that I will someday be rescued by an organization like this. Today it has helped me to discover myself and quit my addictions. My future plan is to get educated, be employed and help my family after transforming myself.
At this center, we're providing them with full medical care, plus a choice of vocational training that suits their capacity and level of education. For example, we train them as cleaners, guards, and some are already helping us as messengers and as registrars in our clinic.
The city's administration has also recently launched a fund that they say will be used to provide shelter and to take care of basic needs for people living on the street. The scheme will also allow for those over 60 to live at elderly care centers for the remainder of their lives.
We have prepared a scheme that creates employment for this part of the society. We have also schemes for the poorest of the poor, and they can also benefit from that. However, some of them are not interested in taking part in these schemes. They say that they can earn easy money. They sometimes go beyond begging and take part in criminal activities.
But despite all this support, one of the main challenges that still remains is how to keep people from returning to the street. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
And your business news is coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Nigeria plans an increase of value-added tax on goods and services. And business confidence in South Africa hits an all-time low, with retail and wholesale traders recording the biggest declines.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Nigeria has announced plans to increase value-added tax on goods by 5% as it seeks to plug a budget shortfall. Currently, the government collects 7.2% as VAT, the lowest rate in the world. Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed is implementing measures to wean Africa's biggest oil exporter off its reliance on crude sales. The tax increase, however, must be approved by Parliament. Raising taxes in Nigeria remains a challenge as most businesses are not registered. Last year, Nigeria raised around $17 billion in taxes and is seeking to double the figure in 2019. Meanwhile, business confidence in South Africa has dropped to a 20-year low. Figures out this week showed a strained economy taking a toll on the country's ability to do business. According to the latest reading from the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, business confidence dropped to 21 index points in the third quarter from 28 in the previous quarter. Sumitra Naidu filed this report.
4 out of the 5 sectors that make up business confidence deteriorated in the third quarter, with retail and wholesale traders recording the biggest declines. Confidence hasn't been this low since the 1998 emerging market debt crisis.
It's a shocking figure, but not unexpected. I haven't seen a figure as low as that in many, many years. Anything above 50 means you're in expansion territory. Anything below 50 means you're in recessionary, effectively. And at 21, you're in deep trouble. And this is very much in line with what the governor of the Reserve Bank, Lesetja Kganyago, talked about a couple of months ago, when he said that we are in the longest downturn since 1945.
The latest figures show 7 out of the 13 sub-indices fell in August. 4 improved, while 2 were unchanged from the previous month. The month-on-month decline was attributed to a decrease in merchandise export volumes, a weaker rand exchange rate, and declining all-share prices on the JSE. The figures suggest that 8 out of every 10 business people are discontent with the current economic environment. The private sector is still reluctant to spend on any expansion or to employ new people.
It's imperative that the private sector invest. They've got a lot of spare cash, because without that, again, that would be a way of getting movement in this economy. But without it, it's not going to happen. So I think a dose of realism has to come in place from government, where you have the unions, you have government, you have the private sector, all coming together and trying to work out and thrash out a mechanism whereby you can get realistic projects, you can get the private sector coming in and investing with confidence.
There was some respite amidst the bleak data. Credit rating agency Moody's issued a statement easing fears of an imminent downgrade.
They said the likelihood of a downgrade of South Africa's foreign debt in November is very low. So I think that speaks volumes. Moody's is right behind Cyril Ramaphosa. So I think Cyril has still got an awful lot of friends out there in the West, and certainly amongst the business community in South Africa. All of the ratings agencies, probably even including Fitch, they're supportive of South Africa. They want this country to succeed.
The focus now moves to the Reserve Bank's MPC meeting next week in the hope that more relief will be on the cards to help stimulate spending again. Smitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Is a Brexit breakthrough on the cards, despite more talks between the UK and EU officials and solutions being thrown into the mix by the European Parliament? Nothing concrete emerges this week as the clock keeps counting down to the UK crashing out of Europe. Mariam Zaidi has more from Brussels.
The EU Parliament's president says that they're willing to revisit the original idea of a Northern Ireland-only backstop in a bid to break the Brexit impasse. David Sassoli was, though, highly critical of UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who he said had not provided the EU with any legally credible alternatives to the Irish backstop as set out in the withdrawal agreement. And he added that there can be no agreement with the UK without some form of a backstop to protect the Good Friday Agreement. But following that Thursday morning meeting of EU Parliament political group leaders and the EU's lead Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier, it seems the EU Parliament, who of course have the final say on any Brexit deal, would be willing to grant the UK a further Brexit extension to stop them crashing out without a deal on October 31st.
In caso di un'uscita senza accordo,
if there is a no-deal departure, it will entirely be the responsibility of the UK. And it is still bound by its financial obligations, respect of citizens' rights, and the Good Friday Agreement.
Now, over at the EU Commission, more of the same, unfortunately, on Brexit. Confirmation of no breakthrough or no solutions on the Irish backstop conundrum. And that despite the fact that Boris Johnson's Brexit envoy David Frost was in town conducting meetings with the EU's Brexit task force on Wednesday. Now, a further meeting is scheduled for Friday. Mariam Zaidi, CGTN, Brussels.
Mauritius' second-largest bank, SBM, announced that it has partnered with China's UnionPay. The deal opens the door for its customers in Africa to leverage on UnionPay's global footprint to make both online and real-time purchases. The cards are accepted in over 174 countries with 55 million merchants, making it ideal for travelers and tourists. SBM says the move is part of its plan to expand further into Africa and act as a bridge between the continent and Asia. Uche Okoronkwo sat down with KC Lee Kwong Wing, the chairman of SBM Holdings and UnionPay's Africa Regional Council, to find out the bank's plans to expand their reach on the continent.
It is very competitive in pricing, and there's a lot of trade between Africa and China, and it is really pointless that all these trade payments and services should be routed to the United States, converted in dollar from local currency, and then from dollar into the local currency in China, and pay all these intermediary interchange fees, which can be cut, very, very significantly by UnionPay. And secondly, also is for financial inclusion, because we have a UnionPay prepaid card, which is very low cost charge for any payment and any transactions. We can reach out to a lot of unbanked population.
Now, of course, SBM is trying to secure a foothold, especially in the Indian Ocean, Africa region, in light of new deals such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How do you plan to position yourself on that trade corridor?
We have the resources in Mauritius, we have technology, we have human capabilities and competencies in Mauritius. We are in India, we are in Asia, So we felt that, Kenya will, act as a hub for us to capitalize on that flow of goods, capital, and resources between Asia and Africa. Especially at a time when European banks and US banks are de-risking Africa and are moving out of Africa. As you can see, all the banks have gone out of Africa, the latest being Barclays Bank. Right? So there's no more European, Western banks in Africa. So Africa should be on its own. So we are an African bank. So we decided that we are going to make Kenya a hub for us in our venture into Africa.
Now, you have been quite aggressive in your expansion in Kenya. You acquired Fidelity Bank in 2017 and then took on the struggling Chase Bank. Give us an update on your operations in the country and your plans to expand further.
So we decided that we are going to make Kenya a hub for us in our venture into Africa. And we are going it in a big way, because Mauritius being a financial center, we are mustering resources and raising all the financial muscles and capabilities in Mauritius to service all the needs in Kenya, and especially the needs of the Eastern African region in its financial transactions with Asia. Kenya, as I said, is an entry point, but we need to stabilize, and strengthen our presence here, because we took over 2 ailing banks. So we need to strengthen our presence here before we can reach out to other regions. But we can still serve the region through Kenya, right? And obviously West Africa is very far away, but we are a French-speaking country also. So we are also looking into opportunities of going to French-speaking Africa.
The Egyptian government is leading a major plan to digitally transform itself by the year 2025. According to the North African economy, the new system aims to support the efforts of the government to raise the efficiency and quality of the services. With the details, here's CGTN's Adel Makroui.
Painful lines and tiring red tape. That's how many would describe their experience while getting a service from the Egyptian government. Egypt understands that it's losing time, money, and business opportunities because of that. The nation is currently rushing to complete its digital transformation program.
Digital transformation is very useful to the citizens and makes the government very efficient. Procedures that could take up to a month can now be accomplished digitally in a few hours. That will reflect greatly on the economic growth and produce more caliber, which will attract investors.
Egypt is allocating more than $480 million to implement its digital vision. Already there is a 15.7% increase of mobile internet users in 2018, and more than 30 million electronic payment cards have been issued during the same year.
There was a 12.5% growth in the technology industry last year. This segment now represents 3.5% of the GDP, producing exports worth $3.6 billion. In financial inclusion, Egypt used to be ranked 51st in the world. In 2018, Egypt climbed to the 36th place, and the government took the decision to refuse cash payment above $30.
Moving in line with digital transformation is the financial inclusion program. Egypt wants to boost e-commerce, increase point-of-sales devices tenfold by next year.
The Egyptian government believes that digital transformation could be the answer to many of its problems, like bureaucracy, managing spending, and therefore cutting budget deficit. Egypt aims to deliver 174 different digital services by the end of this year and to transform the entire government digitally by the year 2025. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Meet the diving club volunteers saving lives in Somalia.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Let's go to Somalia now. And the absence of lifesavers in public beaches has forced a group of volunteers to take up the role of protecting people from drowning. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo met the volunteer lifeguards and files this report from Mogadishu.
It's evening in Mogadishu, and this group of swimmers are conducting last-minute exercise ahead of an hour-long training session on life-saving skills. The exercise is taking place at this public beach in Mogadishu known as Lido, a popular hangout spot mainly for young people. 32-year-old Abdullah Sheikh Saeed is the brains behind this volunteer group, and he plans to form the city's next batch of professional swimmers and lifesavers. However, with the lack of training facilities and swimming pools, the team routinely receives survival swimming lessons at this public beach on the importance of preventing drowning.
I came up with this idea after we lost several people while